Imagine waking up to ocean views instead of an alarm clock. That's a question that I ask every day of my life of people, okay? And I don't ask it because it's a fantasy. I ask it because it's something that you can actually achieve. You can actually have a bank account that's growing and you can feed that adventurous side of you. That's something that you can achieve. So then the next question that I usually ask is then why are you waiting? Why not now? Okay. Because now is actually the best time, the absolute best time for you to transform your life and consider opportunities outside of the United States borders. Okay. Now, the United States has long since been the country that is believed to be the place where everybody migrates to, right? It actually holds one-fifth of the world's international migrant population. But now, that idea that people come from all over the world, is that really the truth? Or is it a myth that we're holding on to from like the 18th century? In the last 30 or 40 years, has that really been the case? Okay. When we look at the 15% of the US population that represents, quote unquote, its immigrants, we really find that they really come from a handful of countries, usually countries in Latin America and Mexico. And then on a far lesser number, we look at the people who are from other countries like China, Philippines, for example. Okay. When Americans, on the other hand, when Americans look at where are the best places for us to live, all of a sudden the world becomes our oyster. Okay. Why is that? Why is that? And more significantly, when we look at the opportunities for Black Americans, why is this something that Black Americans should seriously consider? My name is Arnitha Webb, and I'm a global lifestyle strategist, and I help people transform their life so that they have a life of financial freedom, location independence above all, and a thriving life abroad. And I do that for people who are really, truly ready to make a change. Now, let's look at some facts because we have to operate in truth, right? Let's look at opportunities like career opportunities. When we look around the world, we see really robust job markets, especially in European countries and especially in Asian countries as well, and especially in sectors like engineering and technology. You take a country like Luxembourg. Luxembourg has a very high GDP, a very thriving community. When you look at countries like the Netherlands, France, a lot of European countries, you look at the work life balance, right? And you find that the majority of those countries, people are working on average of anywhere between 30 to 35-hour work weeks. Compare that to Americans who are working on an average of 40 plus hours per work week, right? You look at the number of time off, the vacation days, for example. In most other countries, you'll find vacation days are 25 plus per year. In the United States, there's really is no federal mandate that says that a company has to give you, X amount of vacation days. On average, working for a US company, you're lucky for those 2 weeks off. And we're not even going to get into the family leave. Okay. We're not even going to go there. We're going to keep it moving and we're going to look at education. Education, if you're going to school as an in state student, this is usually the first point of entry of acquiring a lot of debt for US citizens. So if you're going as an in-state student, you can look for an average tuition of anywhere between $11,000 to $13,000. Out of state, then you're looking at upwards of 30,000 plus per year. This is usually, again, the first chunk of debt, serious debt that Americans acquire. Now, let's compare that to a country like Germany, where whether or not you're a domestic or international student, you're going to go to school for free. You will have a small nominal administrative cost, nothing like a US tuition. All right. And if you want to pursue higher education, like a doctoral degree, in most European countries, you're going to be able to pursue that doctoral degree for free or for an extremely, extremely low cost. Now, let's keep it moving and let's look at healthcare because unfortunately, we're not doing well up against the world when it comes to healthcare. We're actually the lowest of all developed nations. We are the lowest, and we're the lowest end of the spectrum in two very significant areas. Now, most of us, it's going to come as no surprise to know that cost because we have the highest cost in healthcare, right? We're the only, of all the developed nations, we're the only one that doesn't even have a public option, but also in overall healthcare and mortality rates. We are operating at the lowest end of the spectrum when compared to other developed nations, unfortunately. This is also usually another area where Americans just acquire a massive amount of debt. It takes a lot of families have lost homes because of the debt that they've acquired because of some unexpected medical emergency. Okay. Let's keep it moving and let's look at safety because you hear a lot of people say, oh, it's not safe outside of America. And when I hear that, I automatically know that they don't know what they're talking about, unfortunately. Because when it comes to, let's look at something like homicides, right? When you look at homicides, you will find that anywhere between 6.5 to 7% per 100,000 people die from homicides in the United States. Compare that to anywhere else in the world that's not in an active war, and you will struggle to find a country that even reaches 3% compared to our 7% per 100,000 people. It just does not happen on the scale that it happens in the United States. And we're not specifically going to isolate gun violence because we know no other country compares to gun violence like we do. We lose over 50,000 people a year just to gun violence. And I'm not even going to talk about or look up anything about school shootings because these kind of things are non existent in other parts of the world. When people say that it's not safe in other parts of the world, they're talking about a handful, and I do mean a handful of countries that are in active wars. And even some of those countries still don't hit the number of deaths, gun violent deaths that we hit, and we're not in the midst of a war. And that's just facts. That's just facts. Let's keep it moving and let's think about cost of living because a lot of times when people are looking at going outside of the US, the first thing they zoom in on is cost of living, and I always say that's not the first thing you should look at. But let's talk about cost of living, and that's going to be like what? Housing, utilities, food, transportation, pretty much anywhere. Australia, all the European nations, the Asian country, pretty much you're going to have a 50 to 70% lower monthly cost versus any of your cities in the United States. And that's just a fact. Okay. So this is why the world is really our oyster when it comes to looking for places outside of the US, especially for Black Americans. Okay. So whether or not you're considering, working remote, living outside of the United States part time, or becoming a full fledged expat, really the choice is yours, and you can't go wrong with either of the choices. Either way, you're going to experience more safety. Either way, you're going to have more freedoms. Either way, you're going to be happier. Either way, you're going to have more opportunities and less limitations because you won't be in a country that prioritizes profits over people. Okay. So this is why now now is the best time actually, especially for Black Americans, to consider life outside of the United States. And let's do away with the myths.